So this is the most vivid part. The session post lunch. It's always going to be a challenge for me to ensure that once our eyes are wide open. So let's hook up with it. Because this is going to be an even more interesting session. The first one, obviously, we did some exercise that made it way more interesting. We talked about a lot of examples. Now, this is basically the one that is somebody spreading butter. We do this on a daily basis for all the kinds of cycles. So, I'll be happy to share some of my experience and learnings from the usage of that space. Okay, so you've already told me about the cycle. Right. Is this screen now visible to everyone? It's better. Can anyone tell me what is the research design and why do we do research? It's a very redundant question, but still, anyone want to take a stab at it? Why do we search for it again? Research. There is no right or wrong. This is clear. Why do we need to do the research? Why do we need to research for it again? Yeah. That's a fair point. Basically, there might be a lot of literature finding that are already available in space for which we are planning a program. But you might need to contextualize it for the non-learning program. So that's why we go ahead with conducting the research. Now, what is the difference between research and evaluation? Is research a subcomponent of evaluation or is it vice versa? That's right. So evaluation is a part of research. It is a type of research that we do. Why is it a subset and not a superset of research? Research could be of any kind. Research could be causal, research could be exploratory. Right? So for example, if I want to understand how many people in this room have had chicken lunch, and that is my research question. But I don't need to do evaluation. I don't need to still change. My evaluation is all that should come to my mind is change. Evaluation is basically to ascertain any change that is happening because of it. Right? Chicken. Right? This is going to be some. I just want to know how to do this. Right? That is simple research. Now, if I were to understand, say, more after post lunch, I have a question. How will you add chicken meat and chicken gravy? Also, proposing people to add chicken yesterday. So, I'm basically trying to see whether that percentage of that actually very much changed over the course of the year. Then I'm talking about that. I'm not talking about research. Research obviously is a evaluation of but then it is more second is evaluation basically is referring to some change between two time frames or between two groups. So every time we talk about evaluation, the first thing that comes to mind is change. right? It could be between groups, it could be over a period of time, etc. Okay, this is simple. Not sleepy yet, right? Okay. So these are some of the points that we are going to discuss in today's session. I'm just trying to wrap up the theory as soon as possible so that we can get going on the examples. And there are a lot of examples that I can share. So let's focus more on gathering as much, having as many examples as possible being discussed in the session rather than just theoretical concepts. Forget about this. Okay, so every time we are conducting a research, you would have heard of a research design being adopted. What is a research design? Anyone? What's a research method? All of us have conducted research at some point in time in our lives. Maybe a smaller research or a long-term research, larger research. What's a research method? What is qualitative method? What is quantitative methods? So when I'm talking about methods, I'm just talking about the kind of data that I'm going to collect from the respondent. Okay, so every research or evaluation is basically driven by, largely in most cases, one major evaluation question or one major research question. Like, for example, the kind of LFA, TOC and RF that we prepared in the first session. What was a key evaluation question? What was a key evaluation question? We had targets, right? Targets are a key evaluation question. Just put them in the form of question. That becomes your key evaluation question. Right? So we had one of the indicators which basically said that 20% of the households have an annual income change of 30% or more. Right? The evaluation question would be, did 20% of the households have an annual income change of 30% or more? Simple. That is the evaluation question. Now, this is a very, very important point. Evaluation questions, research questions need to be ascertained first before starting up with taking up on the designs, the frameworks, the methods or anything of that sort. You need to finalize on the questions that you need to answer. What do you seek is the first thing that we need to understand. And let's not get too philosophical about it. Let's not ask other questions like, why do we seek this? Okay, because then we are moving into uncharted territories. Okay, let's keep it very, very simple. What do we seek, or what is the question that we are trying to address? So, evaluation question or research question is something that we should finalize beforehand at the start of a research assignment. Let's say the state of Meghalaya is actually implementing an MGNRGS program in the state with the help of the central government. Okay, and it has been implemented for like how many years? UPA started it, I think back in 2011-12. So it's been almost a decade, right? So MGNRGS, you want to understand what has been the change in the household income because of MGNRGS. Okay, so you're talking about two things here in this evaluation question. What is my evaluation question? What is the change in the household income because of the MGNRGS program in the state of Meghalaya? Right? I'm talking about two things. I'm breaking the question again in two parts. What is the change in household income? That is question number one. Part two of this question is because of MGNRGS in the state of Meghalaya. So what I'm also trying to do here is not only talk about change, but also talk about attribution, another fancy term.
So I'll be taking you through a lot of jargons, and these are supposedly important in the research and evaluation space. So please bear with me. Uh, Attribution is what we are saying is that it has happened because of certain program only. And I mean, if you see, there'll be 10 more schemes by the government of India or by the government of the state of Meghalaya that would be contributing to the household income, to the change in the household income. Right. So, for example, there are a lot of skill related DDU, GKY sort of activities that are also being undertaken. Right. So that helps improve the skills. Then there are lots of placements and job fairs that are being organized. People are getting jobs. So at the end of the day, their incomes are going up. So DDU, GKY is another program that is affecting or influencing the household income. Am I right? Agreed? We are in agreement here, right? Okay. Point number 2. Tell me about other schemes that are also contributing to the household income. Any? NRLM? So basically, the government of Meghalaya will have its own SRLM also working in the state. The SRLMs are basically largely following the SHG-led model, in which they are developing a lot of self-help groups. The self-help groups come together. The women in the groups come together in the groups of like 10 to 12 members in each of these SHG groups. They save a lot of money. Then what happens is they provide loans as when required for any livelihood activities. They are also engaged in producer groups. So producer groups is the kind of, say, if 10 farmers or 20 farmers are producing the same crop, their chances of selling it at a higher price or the negotiation power increases for those farmers, right? So you are better place to fix the cost for you produce. So that's why producer groups are being formed. 100 farmers, 200 farmers, 300 farmers are coming together for growing the same crop and then selling it to the market at better prices. Right? Now let's see if these groups are registered as companies, they become producer companies or farmer producer organizations or farmer producer companies. Right? Then we are talking about like 5,000 farmers, 10,000 farmers coming together and selling a produce. Okay, so they have better returns in that kind of a situation. That is also influencing the income of the farmers or the farmer households, right? So there are several schemes, but what am I most interested in? I'm not interested in what happened because of NRLM or because of DDU GKY. I'm only concerned about what has changed that has happened because of MG and REGS. Okay, so that is what I am talking about, attribution. What is the attribution? Because of what? In evaluation, most evaluations you would always specify because of my intervention, because of a certain intervention, because of a certain program, because of a certain scheme. Okay, so there is a possibility that the incomes might have doubled for the farmers. I'm just giving a hypothetical situation, although everyone would want it to happen, but still, let's say it increased by 100%. But I'm not concerned about 100%. I'm only concerned about what happened about MG and RGS. Maybe let's say it's only 10% that income is increased. So this is basically the kind of answer that I want. Right? So evaluation gives you two things. I'm talking about impact evaluations. There are also process evaluations. Can anyone tell me what is process evaluation? As the name suggests, we are talking about certain processes that were supposed to be followed. So when you start a program, you say that every month there are supposed to be 10 batches of training that must happen. Right? Or there should be at least like one training happening every week, which means in a month there should be at least like 4 trainings happening. That is a process that you've set. Right? And then you evaluate it. You get a third party, maybe you just form an MIS, right? And you just see whether this is happening or not. The underlying assumption here is that if your processes are followed or religiously followed, then you'll be able to achieve your target or the end objective or the goal statement, right? So it's just like if the cricket team is actually preparing for to win the World Cup, they will take care of their diet, they'll take care of their exercise, they'll do a lot of net practice, and they'll have a lot of practice sessions, right? These are all processes. They'll also do they'll probably run 100 meter in say 18 seconds, 20 seconds, 22 seconds, right? So the faster they run, they are getting closer to a better fielding team. Fielding is an important component of winning the game, right? So these are basically steps and procedures and processes that you have kept in place just to ensure that you meet the end goal, right? The hypothesis here, the assumption here is that if you follow all these processes, you will be able to achieve the end goal, right? So if there was one training that was supposed to happen every week in every month, and if you have an evaluation which said that out of 30 trainings only 25 were conducted, then you get a sense that because of those 5 trainings, probably you are on the course of not meeting your end goal, or you did not meet your end goal. So that becomes, when you're looking at processes, that is a process evaluation. When you're looking at changes in processes over a period of time or between groups, then it is process evaluation. When you're looking at impact level indicators and trying to see whether the impact level indicators have changed over a period of time or because of your intervention between the two groups, then it is impact evaluation. There's another kind of evaluation that happens. Have you heard of the term outcome evaluation? Let's say I don't have a lot of resources. I'm also not very ambitious. I don't want to spend a lot of time thinking about 10 other things. I'm just looking at outcome level indicators. I'm not thinking about the impact level indicators at all. Right? Maybe my impact level indicator would take 5 years. I don't have that much patience. I don't have that much money to invest in my program also. My job is to simply get the people skilled and get their certificates done. Okay. So I'm simply looking at the outcome level indicators, that they have become skilled to get into certain kind of jobs, right? They've got the certification also. If I'm evaluating a change at the outcome level, it becomes outcome evaluation. Simple, right? So we've talked about 3 kinds of evaluations here. Impact evaluation, outcome evaluation, and process evaluation. You would also hear another kind of evaluation being conducted these days, though it is not technically correct, but I'll still mention it here. Some people call it progress evaluation. Please don't use this term ever. It's more of progress monitoring rather than progress evaluation, right? So when you're talking about progress, it's already a change, right? It's already a change that we're trying to understand, and then why are you adding another round of change there, right? So please don't use this term. Progress can be monitored, so progress monitoring can be used. Progress evaluation, please don't use this term. Okay, so there are largely 3 kinds of evaluations that you will come across in the social development space in the kind of work that we do. So process evaluations, outcome evaluations, impact evaluations. These 2, have you heard of the term baseline, midline, or midterm? Endline or end term? Have you heard of these terms? I'm sure all of us have, right? Baseline is the situation when the project hasn't started getting implemented. In the absence of a program, in the absence of the project, the situation is called baseline. This is basically a survey that you are conducting at T0, right? At the inception of the program, before the initiation or before the implementation actually starts, in the absence of a program, it's baseline. What is midline midterm? Obviously, if it is conducted anytime between the baseline and the end line or the end of the program situation, anytime if it is conducted at the middle between these two time frames is called a midline evaluation, right? And the last one, as the name suggests, it's after the project has ended. It is not towards the end of the project, it is after the project has ended. Okay, so the time frames for these two become very, very crucial. It has to start before the project has been implemented. This has to start after the project has been implemented. So let's say this starts at T0 and this ends at TE, right? What if I conduct the baseline 2 months before? Say I am doing an agriculture study, an agriculture survey. Right, and I wanted to understand what has been the change in my yield for a certain crop over the period of 2 years. I am basically looking at an innovative solution that basically helps me manage pest infestation for a particular crop. Let's say cotton. Okay, so cotton is a cash crop. Pest infestation is one of the major concerns for crop cultivation. I want to improve my yield, so I have maybe a certain pesticide or maybe certain innovative AI based technologies that gives me the suggestion that this kind of a pest is infecting your crops. You need to deploy this kind of an fungicide or a herbicide or any kind of a pesticide, right? So that helps me save my crop. That is the intervention. Let's say if I was supposed to conduct a baseline 2 months before the initiation of the project, is that okay? Or is there something wrong in this? Or is there something wrong in conducting the study 2 months before the baseline? Baseline would still be a baseline. Baseline's definition is in the absence of the project you are conducting the survey. So even 2 months before, there would be no intervention, right? You can still go ahead and conduct the survey. Okay, so in this kind of a situation, let's say the month has changed or the seasons have changed. It has moved from Kharif to Rabi, or from Rabi to Kharif, also from Rabi to Zaid or any kind. The seasons have changed. Now then, it becomes a problem for you. You've basically got a baseline in Kharif that will be compared to an end line that you will conduct in Rabi. The kinds of crops that you were growing will differ. The external environment that you are growing these crops in is different. Kharif, you might have monsoons and a lot of rainfall and everything. Rabi, you won't have. Right? The soil water retention changes. So, as an evaluator, what we've understood is that we need to definitely be very wary of the time at which the baseline, end line, midline should be conducted. So time is very, very important. Second is that we need to be very wary of the external influencers or external factors, because they can make or mar the entire evaluation. So I'll just tell you one thing. I think most of us, or at least some of us, would have published some papers, maybe published some papers in peer-reviewed journals. If not, one of the key experiences that most people have in the field of research and evaluation is that when you present it to a group of researchers or evaluators, so every time you come up with findings, you have to present the approach and methodology, and you have to defend your methodology in front of several researchers and evaluators who are just there to actually pull you down. Okay, so most of the papers are actually scrapped at the approach and methodologies, that section. If you're not able to defend it, the approach and methodology, the design, then your findings are no good. So all of that would be scrapped, right? So that's why evaluation designs or research designs are very, very important. So if you are able to, if you come up with a good research design, if you have adopted a good evaluation design, there's a good chance that your findings will be accepted. If you're not able to do it, nobody would accept the findings that have come out of your study. Right? So that's why research design becomes very, very important. Now, what is a research design and what is the research methods? Methods we talked about, qualitative research, quantitative research, right? So these are qualitative methods, quantitative methods. So this is basically the type of data that you're collecting from the respondent. If it is quantitative in nature, if it is numbers, right, then becomes a quantitative study. If it is like more open-ended, it could be both quantitative and qualitative, right, then it is a qualitative study. And then there is a third. It's called mixed methods approach. You can have both quantitative and qualitative as your study, or to address your inquiries or the research questions that you have, right? So these are methods. Now let's talk about designs. What are designs? Have you heard of treatment and control? RCTs, the buzzwords, DIDs, RCTs, anything of that sort? Okay. Right. So let's think of a typical clinical research. You would have seen a lot of PhD students or doctors sitting in good laboratories and they're playing around with mice, right? And they're providing intervention or certain vaccines to certain mice and not to the others. You would have also heard of the term placebo. Placebo is basically, maybe you're just not giving them any vaccine, you're simply injecting water, right? It will have no effect or no ill effect or no positive effect also. It's just placebo. It's just playing with your mind, right? The other person might feel that yes, I've been injected, so I'll not get the disease anymore. But basically what has gone into the veins is pure water, H2O. Right? So you would have heard of the term treatment control. So treatment, as the name suggests, the respondents are getting the treatment there, or the mice are getting the treatment there. So they have a separate group. The control are the ones who are either not getting any treatment or are getting the placebo. This is another group. How do we get our COVID vaccines or any vaccines? They simply test it on mice, certain vaccines for their efficacy, right? To what extent they have been effective. And they run this experiment with hundreds of mice, thousands of mice, and with kinds of animals that share similar chromosomes with the human beings, with the Homo sapiens, right? So it can happen on, the members of our larger family, right? I'm talking about the apes, by the way. So, right. Okay. So what they do? They provide the vaccination to this group. They don't provide the vaccination to this group, right? And they simply just test the difference between these two. How many of them have been treated? How many of them have not been treated? Let's say that 70% mice in the treatment area in the treatment group have been treated with that vaccination, right? And let's say because of your immunity, or many people got COVID also, right? Many people were not immunized also, but still they got treated because probably their immunity was too good. Maybe the genes might have also played some important role. You never know. So let's assume that 30% of the mice in the control areas or in the control group also were cured. What is the net impact of the vaccination? It's a simple 70 minus 30, 40%. So what are we trying to say? We've talked about change. We've talked about change, which is 40%. Right? And we've talked about attribution also. That this 40% change has happened because of the vaccine that has been provided to certain mice. Okay, why are we saying that? Because this number is larger than the control. I am assuming that would be the case. Right? Control may anyways, I mean, because of immunity and other things, or maybe genetic reasons or some other reasons, 30% are getting cured anyway. And because of your vaccine, the treatment rate, 70% are getting cured. It's a simple difference. 70 minus 30, 40% is the net change because of the vaccine. I'm saying two things. It is the net change because of the vaccine. So that's impact evaluation. And what the design that we've adopted here is a randomized controlled trial, RCTs. If you Google RCTs if you Google RCTs, you'll find a lot of literature available there. Many times it would be called the gold standard of evaluations. Why are they called the gold standard of evaluations? Why is it called the gold standard of evaluation? Because it was traditionally done on mice. So all mice look similar. They have the same genes. They have the same chromosomes. They are basically fed the same thing. They are kept at the same temperature, room temperature, 25 degrees. Everything about them is same. So basically they are forming a homogeneous group. So there is no external factor that is contributing to the change. So all the external factors have been controlled for in an RCT. And that's why those vaccines are administered to human beings, because they've undergone such rigorous testing several times with several other beings that they are very confident that the vaccine will be effective. And that's why it gets administered to so many people, billions of people around the globe. So this is RCT, randomized controlled trial. Let's break it down. Let's break down this word. Randomized. What is randomized? How many people do we have in this room? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. 24 participants here. If I simply randomly select 12 members, I prepare a list of 1 to 24. So in Excel you can simply do that. 1 to 24 you just write, and then you run a command called rand and then open bracket and close brackets, and it will generate a list of another numbers, and you simply select the first 12 numbers. So half of the people have been randomly selected, the other half have not been selected at all. So the people who have not been selected will fall in the control area or the control group. People who have been selected, you can give them the intervention. Right? So that is your treatment area. Okay. This is randomized control trial. So randomized control, you have a control in place. So every time you hear of this term control, it has two other names as well. Right? So control is used in RCTs, randomized control trials. It is basically counterfactual. And it is also called comparison. So please don't worry, it's basically the same term. As I said, people in the sector actually like using a lot of jargons. So it's basically the same term, means the same thing, but in different contexts it's used. So in terms of RCTs, you will call it a control, because everything else has been controlled for, right? Coming back to the question, what is a research design? Can anyone answer that now? What were we doing in this example? We had a treatment group, we had a control group. We were collecting data from the mice in the treatment group. We were collecting data from the mice in the control group. So collecting data, in this case quantitative data, is basically we are using quantitative methods. So the evaluation method or the research method that we have deployed here is quantitative. That is clear. Now, we are collecting this from two different kinds of groups. How do you divide your sample into different groups? How do you identify your respondents? Right? In how many groups will they be divided? How will they be matched? Will they be similar to each other? That is research design. That is evaluation design. So I'll just put that on the screen also. I'll go one by one without complicating it. And please feel free to ask me questions. No question is a bad question. Please feel free to ask me a lot of questions. Research design is a set of research methods and techniques chosen by a researcher to conduct a study. Oh, sorry. Yeah, is it visible now? In fact, yeah, don't have to write it. Simply a set of methods that you are deploying for answering your research question. Okay, now what are the characteristics of a good research design? It should be free from any bias. Okay, just tell me, how will this concept help you? I mean, if you learn about evaluations, how will this help you in the work that you're doing? Because I definitely need to get a sense of that also. So there are a lot of schemes and programs that you are already working on, right? And there'll be at some point some agencies that will be onboarded to look into those programs and evaluate them and come up with some research or maybe come up with some findings, right? And they would simply go ahead and say that the program has not been successful. It has not been able to meet the desired targets. There's a good possibility because you are so heavily invested into implementation and you are emotionally connected to it. You spent like your sweat and blood is into the implementation, right? And you'll be like, who is this person? Huh? He's simply been onboarded like a month ago and he's coming here and he's telling us that the intervention has not been successful. He knows nothing, right? And it becomes a sort of a tussle between the implementer and the evaluator, right? Because evaluations are episodic in nature. So maybe at the start of the program, some evaluator will come, just do a baseline for you. Maybe somewhere in the middle, he'll conduct a midline for you. And towards the end of the project, one would conduct an endline. Let's say your program has been running for the last 10 years. You've spent your sweat and blood into this for the last 10 years. And so simply in 3 rounds, someone comes and says, okay, your project is not working. Obviously, you'll feel bad, right? So as an implementer, we also need to get or at least have the skill sets to appreciate, to question, to contradict the kind of research design or evaluation design that the agency has adopted, whether those findings are relevant or not. As I mentioned, when we present our findings to anyone, most of the times it's like if the buck stops at just defending the approach and methodology. If you are able to defend it fairly well, then your findings will be accepted. If you're not, that's where it ends, right? So many a times you would see a lot of agencies talking about a sample size of 4,000 households, 6,000 households, and then giving you a very good, cost for conducting that survey or for that evaluation. You would see, you would basically say, I mean, why are they asking for so much resources, right? Now that is the kind of appreciation that will happen if you develop or if you have all these skill sets. You also understand what the evaluator or from where the evaluator is coming from. And most of the times, because as implementers we get so heavily invested and emotionally invested in the day-to-day activities, in the implementation activities, that we forget that at the end of the day, the project has signed an MOU with the donor. It could be the government, it could be the World Bank, it could be an ADB, it could be any other third party. That an MOU or a contract has been signed on certain indicators for which certain targets are there. Right, what we did in the previous session. So that is the RBM. So RBM is the basic criteria on which both the parties sign a contract that this is what I commit to achieve in the next 5 years with these resources that you are providing me. Now, if that company, if that organization is not able to achieve those targets, then becomes a redundant exercise, right? So, as implementers, we should also be aware of how these M&E activities are conducted. So, at the back of our mind, I mean, obviously, most of our time will go into the implementation only, but we also need to be in a situation where we appreciate where M&E can help us achieve our targets. We don't want our programs to fail or anyone to come like once a month and just tell us that things are not working. We also need to understand why that particular guy is saying that things are not working and why they haven't worked. Okay, so that's why it's equally important as an evaluator, when we go to the field for any kind of a program, we also need to have a knowledge about the implementation, and that knowledge has to be much more than the implementer, because at the end of the day, we'll be presenting our findings to the implementer, right? And the implementer would ask us a lot of questions, and they'll say, who is this guy? Who gave him the authority to come to us and preach us about our implementation, right? So for me as an evaluator, I'll have to learn more than you before I present the findings to you. So that is the kind of challenge that I have. Similarly, if you have the skill sets, if you have an understanding of M&E, probably you'll be able to think about it while you are implementing the program and ensure that the program is successful towards the end of it. That is what I could think of. The point of having discussions on RCTs and quasi-experimental designs and DIDs and instrumental variables, it will all be pointless if I am not able to communicate this message to the group sitting here right now. So do you think there is a merit in having some understanding of M&E? What we are talking about is very, very basic terms, and these are very basic terms. So any organization that you interact with at any point in time will talk about the same things. And probably if you are in a situation to better appreciate it, you might ask them a few more questions. You might help them structure their M&E solutions better. At the end of the day, both of us are working to make the project successful. Right? So why not learn a bit about M&E also? Do you think there is a merit in this argument? Okay, so I assume this silence is a yes. So let's go on with the next slide. Don't. Okay. Okay, these 4 points are very, very important. For any research design, these 4 points are very important. And this is something that all the researchers and evaluators struggle with all the time. So I'll keep coming back to the mice experiment example, but please don't take it otherwise. It's just an example. I'm not against animals, but it's just that that's how our cities are conducted. So I have to state that example. Okay. The first thing that any evaluator needs to bypass is bias. Okay. So let's say out of the 22, 23 people sitting here, I randomly choose like 10 people and conduct a survey with them to understand the feedback for this session today. Okay. I'm assuming that whatever response that I get from those 10 people might be true for the entire class, might be true for the entire set of people sitting here. Basically, what I'm trying to do is that this is a population. I'm using the statistical terms now. This is a population, and this is basically my sampling frame 2. Population and sampling frame, 2 jargons. Okay, population is basically all the members in a particular group. Sampling frame, if they are all considered as a part of the evaluation or are considered under the research. So this becomes my sampling frame. So in this case, my population is equal to my sampling frame, right? Let's say that interviewing all these people might not be possible for me. It might be too resource intensive. In this case, because the number is too small, 24 only, I might rather want to simply draw a sample of 10, right? And that sample of 10 should, the findings that I get from that sample of 10 should be true for the entire population. If I were to interview all the 24 members here, let's say I get a sense that 50% found this session to be boring. Right? Let's assume that if I have interviewed all the 24 members here, 50% say or would have said that it is boring. I did a sample survey with only 10 people. And those 10 people told me, if I simply do a characteristic or simply do a proportion calculation, 60% said that it was boring. Now there is a difference. There will always be a difference. No matter how high your sample size is, how large your sample size is, at the end of the day, it is a sample from a very large population. So every time an evaluator comes to you and tells you, so you've missed your target by 0.5% or 0.2%, 0.1%, that is happening because you've gone ahead with a sample survey. You don't have the resources to interview each and everyone in the state of Meghalaya or for the entire country. For that matter, for the entire country. You can't interview everyone unless it is a census. Right? And census, everyone knows, it is super expensive. Right? So that's why we go ahead with the sample survey, and that's where we take the help of statistics. Okay. Now there is a difference of 60%. I'll also take a step back here and just remind you of a few things that we learned basically in 10th standard, 9th standard, 8th standard, 12th standard about statistics. I won't deep dive into it, but it's a very simple concept. If you have interviewed all the people, all the 24 people, 50% have said it's boring, then it is 50% have said it is boring. There is no doubt about it. Right? Definitely 12 people have said it is boring. Okay? But when I am saying it is 60% boring, you never know. Right? So when I am saying out of 10 people, 60% have said that it's boring. It's basically 6 people have said that it's boring. Right? But nobody is interested in sample characteristics. In the evaluation space, or even in the research space, we don't get paid to give you sample characteristics. That my sample says that 60% or 6 people have said it. Tell me what the population says based on your sample. Based on your sample, tell me what was the situation for the population, for those 24 people. So, what I do is, I infer this for the entire population. I infer my results from my sample characteristics for the entire population of 24 people. This is called, anyone? This is called inferential statistics. And this is our bread and butter. Nobody pays us to give you sample characteristics. Then I do a sample of 10 out of a total of 24, and so people said that 60% was boring. 60% people said that the session was boring. That may or may not be true, but I'll have to come up with certain inferential statistics, which basically calculates the proportion based on the sample characteristics that I've calculated and projected to the population of 24 people. Now, when I do that, I'll give you this kind of an estimate. 60% plus or minus 5%. Every time an evaluator gives you a percentage, so this is true for the sample, 60% is true for the sample. It is true for 10 people, right? But when it is being projected to 24 people, then there is a tolerance that comes into play. Plus minus 5% ऊपर नीचे हो सकता है. Then you get into the realm of chance probability. So we are basically saying that 60% is not a point estimate. It is not a point estimate. I mean that you cannot simply put your pen somewhere and say that this is 60%. 60% said it was boring. No, you'll also have to give them a tolerance, 5% less or more. So that is inferential statistics. This is what we are interested in. If I say, I'll just put that in a different example. When we were saying 20% of the households have registered an income increase of 30% or more, right? Out of the entire state of Meghalaya, at least the population would be running in, say, close to a crore, or so I assume. If I cannot interview a crore people, that's too much for me. Can't afford it, right? Literally. Okay, so in that kind of a situation, what do? I simply draw a sample. Let's say I've gone ahead and interviewed 1,000 people. 1,000 people told me that they've got an income increase of 21%, not 20%. Our target was 20%. They've said that they've got an income increase of 21%. Right? I should be happy if my target has been not only been achieved, but it has been overachieved. But that is not true. When I have to project it to the population of 1 crore, it might run, because the sample is too small from the entire population. It's only 1,000 that we are talking about from a crore, right? Then my tolerance will also increase, right? So I might say 21% with a plus or minus 10%. So it could be 11%, it could be 31%.
So besides models,
yeah, that's a very important point. So that's where statistics come into play. So we'll discuss that also. So that's what I'm trying to say. In each of the sample surveys, please don't stick to a point estimate. If anyone tells you that 60% of the people have been doing it, what that person is not telling you is the tolerance, is the range. In statistics, we call it range. In temperature terms, we call it tolerance and all of that. In statistics, we call it range. So it will be 60% plus or minus 5%. So it will range anywhere from 55 to 65%. Right. Let's say instead of sampling 1,000 people, I sampled 10 lakhs out of a crore. What will happen to the range in that kind of a situation? Let's say out of when I interviewed 1,000 people, they told me 21% plus or minus 10%. Right, so it could vary anywhere between 11% to 31%. Right, I have now interviewed 10 lakhs out of 1 crore. They've still told me 21% people are achieving the target. But what happens to the range? Decreases. It decreases because now the strength of your sample is too large. Now you are more confident that whatever your sample characteristics says, it may be closer to the population characteristics also. Because you've interviewed like 10 lakh people now. Earlier, the sample was too small for the overall component. Now it is 10 lakhs, which is almost like 1/10 of the entire component. Right? So now you are much more confident in telling that yes, if my sample survey says that it is 21%, maybe it is more closer to the population survey. So my range actually reduces 21% plus or minus 2%. Still, you are in a bad situation because 21% plus or minus 2% is like 19% to 23%. 20% was your target. So you can still not defend whether your target has been achieved or not. Okay. That's where sampling comes into play. Sample size calculations. So I would have rather wanted to calculate a sample size for my evaluation, which would have been sufficiently been powered to provide estimates for a 15% change. And there are a lot of jargons, there are a lot of terms that I'm using right now, right? I'll simplify it. I should have had a sample size. Who determines whether it should be 10 lakhs or whether it should be 1,000 or whether it should be 4,000, whether it should be 10,000? Right? I have to get the minimum sample that is easier on my pocket, but that still captures whether my target was achieved or not. Okay? So it could be like 4,000 households. I have to spend more than 1,000 households for it, but still it is not as expensive as 10 lakh. And still I might be in a situation to just say that my tolerance is of a certain limit and I'll be able to present my estimates to a certain extent. Right? What happens in this situation wherein, let's say, your target was 20% and you have a 21% from your sample characteristics plus or minus 2%. What happens in that kind of situation? What do you tell the donor? What do you tell the government in that kind of situation? Has the target been met or the target has not been met? As evaluators, we keep it vague. We keep it vague because it is vague for us. We tell them that there is a good possibility that you've achieved the target. Because still, if you see 21% plus or minus 2%, this largely, the chances of you achieving the target is much more. So you still have this gap from 20% to 22% or 23%, wherein, you still have achieved the target. But there's only 19 to 20% area wherein possibly you have not been able to achieve your target. Right? So you don't give the government or you don't give the implementer the benefit of doubt. You simply say that this is what it is. Interpret it the way you like. We would say that there is a fairly high chance that the program has been able to achieve its target, but there is a possibility that it might not have been able to achieve it also by chance. You leave it then and there. Right. So I'm just telling you the perspective of an evaluator, so that you might be in a situation to better appreciate the next time if it happens. Right. If it is like a 24% plus or minus 2%, you fairly achieved it. Okay, 22%, 26%, obviously, nobody questions you. Right. So we were talking about research designs, coming back to research designs. We were talking about bias. So our study should be neutral. It should be free from any kind of a bias. Again, going back to the mice experiment. They look the same, they are the same, have the same genetic characteristic, have the same chromosomes, are fed the same thing, are under the same temperature in a controlled environment. Right? Everything about them is same, which makes them a homogeneous group. So there is no bias. You've done a random allotment of treatment to half of them, a random allotment to the remaining half by not giving them any treatment, or just giving them a placebo. Okay, so it's random, it has happened by chance, so you have no control over it, there is no biasness involved, so it is purely whatever the results that come out of it is simply random and can be easily generalized to the entire population. The last term that I am using can be easily generalized to the entire population. This is something that we call external validity. Okay, it's just to say that yes, whatever findings that have come out of your study can be populated for the entire population, or can be inferred for the entire population. That is external validity. Okay. Now the checks and balances that I ensure to keep this external validity intact are basically called control checks or quality control checks. So every time you would see a research being conducted or an evaluation being conducted, you would see the evaluation team actually giving you telling you about a lot of back checks and spot checks and whatnot, range checks and consistency checks, validity checks that they've included as a part of their evaluation. Why is this important? This is basically important to say that whatever findings that we are giving you is free from, or we have minimized the kind of bias introduced into the system to a large extent, so that whatever findings that are emerging from our study can be accepted true for the population. Okay? Yeah. Any questions till now? Anything that you've not understood? Yeah. Right. So, very valid point. I was coming to that. See, this group, we come from varied backgrounds. We might come from different tribes, we might come from different castes, we might come from different geographies, we might speak different languages, we might look different, right? All of that is true. So that puts us in a situation wherein we are not in that mice experiment kind of a situation, right? That is the problem. That is one of the challenges that any evaluator has to face. This is not a controlled environment. We are not mice. We are dealing with human subjects here, right? So there's a lot of matching that needs to be done. So what I'll do is I'll take like 5 parameters. Let's say the geography that I come from, the race that I come from, the caste category that I come from, right? The financial background that I come from. And then I'll try and seek out of the 24 people sitting here, whom do I match the closest to? Or whom, by match I simply mean, who in these 5 aspects or indicators is closest to me. Okay. So for example, I matched it to all of us, right, sitting here. And I found 2 matches. One being the closest match, the other being the second closest match. Obviously, I'll drop the second closest match. I'll go ahead with the closest match. So what I'll do is, because the other conditions or the external influences are similar across these 2 people, whatever changes now that have happened in me and the other person is because of the intervention only. Is that right to say? You've control for the external influences, right? You've control from where I come from, my race, the caste category, the temperature of this room, all of that, right? You control for all of that. And I found a closest match. And now I need to be compared, or my findings or my outcomes or my impact level indicators need to be compared with the other person to find the difference, what has been the net impact of the project. Whatever be the difference, that will be the true impact of the project. Because I have control for the external influences, external factors. Simple. I'll give another example. I'll give you a real life example. In fact, while explaining this, I'll also explain about RCTs and quasi-experimental designs. Let me try and do that. Okay. Let's say, sorry. Okay. Yeah, this might take some time. We'll get to that. Okay, so we were talking about the four. Yes. We were talking about the four characteristics of a good research design. The first one being neutrality. So we are saying that there is no bias in the selection process. We haven't purposefully selected a few individuals for our study. It is purely random. Right? The second is reliability. So for example, if I were to ask you a question about, say, if I'm conducting a study for household income in this group, I would want to ask you questions on income, right? How do I ask questions on income? Should I just ask you what has been your income in the last 1 year? Think about a rural scenario, and if you were to engage with a respondent from the rural areas, and if you were to ask them about their incomes in the last 1 year, and if you simply ask one question, what has been your income in the last 1 year? Will they give you a true answer or a right answer? First of all, they would think, okay, these guys are from the government. If I tell them a lower income, they'll get me enrolled in some kind of a government program or government scheme, and I'll get benefit from some government scheme. That is one. Second, they might beat you up. Why are you asking me about household income? Who are you? Are you a thief or someone? Right? So, usually you would see a lot of questions being asked to ascertain the household income of the household. Right? They would ask you, okay, what is the income of the household from the different livelihood sources? How much of the income comes from agriculture? How much of your income comes from agricultural labor? How much of your income comes from skilled work? How much of your income comes from salaried work? How much of your income comes from other livelihood activities such as poultry, goatry, fishery, right? Then they might also ask you questions regarding how much remittance did you get from different members that stay outside. Does any other family member also send you money from outside? Maybe you have a daughter who is in a distant land, she's earning there and she sends you money like 1,000 rupees, 10,000 rupees, 1 lakh rupees every month, right? So that also gets included in your household income. That is one way. The other way is that if you finally realize that the person is not going to give you a good response or a correct response, you administer an expenditure model. So you ask them about their household expenses in the last 1 year, and your household expenses become a proxy to your household income. If you spent so much, which means you had that much money to begin with, so that is the underlying reason or underlying hypothesis when we are considering expenditure as a proxy to household income.
Or savings, that also come to play.
No. So expenditure. I mean, there's a gamble that you play there as well. So in expenditure, everyone would quote very high figures. If they spent like 1,000 rupees, they'll say 10,000 rupees I've spent. right? But what is happening that you are getting the same kind of biased responses from all your people. So that kind of a bias gets negated. Okay. If there's an inherent bias in the kind of response that you get for all the questions, that is okay. Okay. So that is fine. So for example, if I were to ask 10 people from the treatment group about their expenditure, they would all have this bias. If I'm talking about their expenditures only, let's say they are all inflating or they are all telling me some bogus numbers for their expenditures or an inflated figure for their expenditures. Right? I'll have the same bias here, I'll have the same bias here. This will get negated. This will get cancelled out. Okay. So that's why people go ahead with this kind of a module, an expenditure module. Right? So there are a set of questions that you need to administer rather than simply asking a simple question. What is your income or what is your expenditure? That is what we're talking about here in validity. You need to administer the right set of tools, the right set of questionnaires, the right set of questions to come up with the findings for your study. Okay. Then let's talk about generalization. The outcome should apply to the population, something that we already discussed. Nobody is interested in sample characteristics. Everyone is interested in what happened to my population. Even if you've conducted a sample survey, just tell me what happened to my population and what is the situation of my population. This is fine. Let's go to the next slide. We are 25 minutes away from closing the session. Okay, so why is a design required? It provides a firm foundation. So this design, say an RCT, basically tells you that you have to collect information from two groups, a treatment group and a control group. Treatment who receives the treatment, control who does not receive a treatment or gets the placebo effect. Right? Let's say I am trying a vaccine on 4 types of groups. I want to be doubly sure of my findings. So what I do, I administer my vaccine to 4 types of groups. Okay. People, then my 4 groups would be people who receive the vaccination, people who don't receive the vaccination, people who receive the vaccination but are midway during their disease. Say COVID affects a normal person for 14 days, or let's say for 7 days. Let's assume that we have another set of people or a group of people who are in the 3rd day of their disease. That's another group. Let's say there's a 4th group also. People who are not from the state of Meghalaya. You are simply trying to see whether your findings are positive only for the state of Meghalaya, for the people in the state of Meghalaya, or is it true for the state of Madhya Pradesh also? If that be the case, then if the findings are true for both these states, for Madhya Pradesh also and for Meghalaya also, then you will be more confident to suggest that your vaccine, despite the differences in the caste, creed, religion, whatever, is functional for human beings, is largely functional for human beings. Right? So these 4 groups, in that case, you have treatment 1, treatment 2, treatment 3, and then pure control. 3 treatment groups, 1 control group. Right? That is also a design, something that we call a 2x2 evaluation. Right? So these kinds of designs are actually giving you a firm foundation to start your data collection process. So design helps you to get a firm foundation. Reduces uncertainty and confusion about the research problem. This is not a major point, but this is still an important one. Helpful for collecting research materials. Again, if I have a quantitative study, in this kind of a situation, I am concerned about quantitative data only. So I'll simply collect some quantitative information, numbers related, and I won't conduct any qualitative data or collect any qualitative data here. gives an idea regarding the type of resources required in terms of money, human resources, time and efforts. So whatever type of research design you adopt helps you determine the sample size. Let's say 1,000 households, you have a certain cost to it. Let's say 10,000 households, you have a certain cost to it. Right? So whatever design you finalize also has a bearing on the resources that you deploy to collect that data. Okay? Guides the research in the right direction, and obviously many more. This one is important. So what is the difference? These are the three kinds of research that are largely conducted: causal, descriptive, and exploratory. Can anyone just tell me what is the difference between all three of them? Causal we've discussed. Can anyone tell me what is causal research? We talked about causal pathways. Causal, every time you hear about causal now, please think of if-then relationship. Causal is if-then sort of a relationship. If the vaccine is administered, then 30% of the population will be treated. If the intervention is provided, 40% of the people will register an income increase of 20% or more. Right? So basically, evaluation deals in impact evaluation or outcome evaluation deals in this domain, causal research. If then kind of a situation, you're always looking for a relationship between two variables. Which are those two variables? The dependent variable and the independent variable. What is the dependent variable? Income is a dependent variable. Your outcome indicators are your dependent variables, because that's where the change is going to happen. They are dependent on what? They are dependent on the intervention. So if you upskill your community, then your income goes up. Right? If you provide them trainings, their income goes up. If they become a part of the SHG group, their income goes up. See the relationship, right? It is a relationship between the dependent variable and the independent variable. Sorry, I'm just digressing from the point. Do we remember the equation of a straight line? This is standard 11 for those who opted for mathematics. Okay. That was a long time back, right? Or even earlier, I think that this was in 9th standard, I guess. Did we remember y is equal to mx plus c? Okay, so this is actually the most important point of the entire evaluation. Remember this? The equation of the straight line was y is equal to mx plus c. What was x here? Slope. Very nice. Slope was actually this. This was something called theta. Right? And the slope was tan theta. Okay. Let's say tan theta is basically this divided by this. Right? This divided by this is tan theta. It is giving you the slope. It is basically telling you what is the elevation. Right? So x is the slope here. sorry, my bad. X is the intercept on the x-axis, m is the slope, and if you extrapolate this is c. This is the constant. Remember any of it? Okay. So this is the regression equation. This is basically why we are doing the evaluation for. This is what it boils down. Okay. So your y is the dependent variable. Y is your dependent variable. Right? X is your independent variable. And C is the external influence that you are basically controlling for. Okay, should I come again on this? It's very simple. Don't get into the mathematics aspect of it. I was just joking around it. It's a very, very simple sort of a thing. Basically, this was the equation of a straight line. This was the y-axis. This was the x-axis. We all know that, right? They meet at this point, which is 0. Now, if you draw, or maybe just travel it back this line, there's this intercept that has been found between 0 and this. This is constant. This is c. This is what we were talking about, the temperature, right? Temperature of the room, the caste, class, creed, religion. These are the external influences that I'm talking about. I'm just talking about whatever we've discussed right now in mathematical terms. Right? So we've discussed the simpler terms first. Now we're coming back to mathematics. So don't worry about it. Okay. X is the independent variable. Now let's see what it is coming to. Let's say your income is equal to, I'm saying 0.5. Let's m be 0.5. Okay. 0.5 times increase in what? Increase in proportion of people getting skilled. That is your x1. Let's say besides skilling, what you also did, you collectivize them, you put them into different groups, into SHG groups, self-help groups. That would have also impacted your income, right? So this is 0.6 into x2 plus, let's say there are other factors also that you have worked on. Probably you would have given them some intervention under MG and RGS, right? It is 0.7 into x3 and then there is a constant. So basically, this is your intervention number 1, this is your intervention number 2, this is your intervention number 3. The program has worked on all these 3 indicators to come up with a dependent, to change the household income. That is the connect between what we discussed and mathematics or statistics. Simple, right? That is what the evaluation is coming down to. It's a simple regression equation. Every time people tell you that your program has been able to achieve a 20% income change, they are saying that this income at baseline vis-a-vis an income that gets calculated end line, the difference between these two is 20%. Right? If I do a difference of this and this, let's say this is x1 baseline just for B for baseline, right? This is x2 for baseline, 2B kar diya. And this is x3 B. So if I simply do a difference of these two, somehow the equation will come to be x1e for end line minus x1b, right, with some constant, with some number here, plus m2, I'm just saying for the slope, x2e minus x2b, and so on and so forth. Last way, you'll have a plus C. Simple. It's basically the income differences is because of the differences in the baseline and the endline values of your interventions. X was your intervention. X was the point that the program intervened. Right? So just a simple difference between these two is going to give you the change in your income indicator. Right? I just shared this because I just wanted to bring home the point. Don't remember this. I mean, you can choose to forget it also. But you now got a sense that where is it coming from and where are we heading towards. Evaluation boils down to regressions. You would have heard of linear regressions. You would have heard of logistic regressions, right? Multivariate regressions. All these kinds of regressions. So it is all about regressions. How much change in this led to how much change in this? How much change in the independent variable led to a change in the dependent variable? How much change in the skill levels led to a change in the income of the household? That is basically what we are trying to say here. Please don't forget the y is equal to mx plus c. That is the most important.
Since this is an economic problem,
Yeah.
we need to sort to economic theories. What if
This is all that I'll talk about. That's all.
we need some of the problems which doesn't have theories unfortunately?
Yeah. So if it was not income, if it had been any other indicator, the same regression would have been adopted here.
I mean, how to identify which dependent variables are to select?
Your dependent variables are your outcome and impact.
How to select which one?
Exactly. So for example, your dependent variables are your outcome indicators or impact level indicators. Okay. And so for example, if you are working on changing the behavior in terms of water sanitation and hygiene, your independent variables would be hand washing behavior, awareness about hand washing practices, right? Just constructing a toilet in the household. These are some of the indicators that you are working on. These are some of the indicators that the entire activity is focusing towards, right? They basically form a part of the equation x1, x2, x3, x4, and then you have x1b, x1e, and all of that, right? So simple difference at the baseline. There is no there is no intervention that has been provided, right? So everything becomes zero. At the end line, you have certain changes. So x1b might be zero, but x1e is a positive change, which will get influenced in when you're calculating the differences between your outcome indicators, your dependent indicators. Simple, right? You don't have to get into too much of economics. I mean, definitely, this is a derivation of the kind of work that people do in economics. But that's it. We don't have to deep dive too much into it. That's all we need. Just remember y is equal to mx plus c, right? And there will be several m's. There will be several slopes. So, for example, by slope, what do I mean? By slope, I mean, let's say this is maximum. Out of these three, 0.7 is maximum, which basically goes on to say that indicator x3 has impacted my income the most, right? It is a multiplier of 0.7, right? So probably x3 has impacted my income the most. The more the slope, the more important that intervention was for the program. Simple, right?
So is that slope anything to do with the counterfactual?
No, counterfactual is different. You will have a separate similar equation for a counterfactual also, right? So what we've done now is the difference between the two groups, income B and income E. This might be for the same group, for the treatment group. You might have another income for the control group also, right? And there would be certain difference in that as well, right? Also, let's see, I mean, you would have also heard about these two terms. So let's say in the treatment group, control group at the baseline stage, when there is no intervention at all, let's say 20% of the people are earning 1 lakh or more, right? And let's say 15% in the comparison group or in the control group are earning 1 lakh or more. That is the baseline study that you've conducted. You've got the results. Here they are. By the way, when I'm sharing the baseline percentages, is this correct or not? Why is it not correct? I mean, let's say, you've conducted the baseline. 20% is the characteristic for your treatment. 15% is the characteristic for your comparison area. Is this correct or not? We discussed this. Nobody's bothered about your sample characteristics. People are bothered about the population characteristics. So this may be a 20% plus or minus 2. That might be a 15% plus or minus 3. Forget about that also right now. Okay. So this is the baseline situation. Say towards the end line, you go and study the characteristics of the treatment in the control group also. Here the situation has improved from 20% to 50%. So here the situation has improved because of several other interventions. It has moved to 25%. What will be the net impact of the project? So, if I do a difference between these two, let's say the difference D1 is 5%. That is the first difference. Okay, the difference between the treatment and the control areas at the baseline was 5%. The difference between the treatment and the control areas at the end line is 25%. What is the net impact of the project? Can I safely say D2 minus D1 will give me the net impact of the project? You simply do a double difference. D2 minus D1, 25% minus 5%, 20% is the net impact of the project. That's evaluation for you. You've simply done an impact evaluation, and this is quasi-experimental design. This is a double difference method that you've just used. So double difference method, as the name suggests, it's a difference between differences. Difference at the baseline between the treatment and control groups with the difference in the treatment and control at the end line. A double difference of these two basically gives you the net impact of the project. Simple.
Can you share
Real life examples? Yeah, sure. Sorry. So let's talk about the real life example. 20% of the people are earning a mean annual income of 1 lakh and above at the baseline. 15% of the people are earning a mean annual income of 1 lakh and above at the baseline. I do a simple difference between these two. 5% is the net change, or not exactly the change. 5% is the difference between the treatment and the control group in the absence of the program at the baseline. Right? Is everyone here with me till now? We did the same survey again, use the same tool, same questionnaire. You go to the same areas, maybe to the same individuals over a period of time. You administer the same questionnaire to them. Now maybe because of the intervention, this 20% has moved to 50%, and because of maybe some other interventions, which is basically something that we call a democratic trend. So even in the absence of a program, there would be certain positive change that would have happened, or certain change that would have happened. So this has moved from 15 to 25%. Right? The difference here is 5%, the difference here is 25%. You do a double difference, gives you 20% is the net impact of the project. You can safely say that 20% of the households have increased their income or mean annual income over 1 lakh rupees because of the project, because of the intervention. Talking about two things, change and Change and starts with an A. Attribution. Change and attribution. Every time you think about impact evaluation, think about two terms: change and attribution. बिना attribution के काम नहीं चलेगा. Attribution is very very important. Okay. Okay, so we are left with only 2 more minutes. I'll just conclude by saying I tried simplifying a lot of points today. It is very easy to get bogged down by the concepts of a different sector, especially when I get into mathematics and statistics, right? But I'll try and simplify things as and when we go, and I've been trying to do that with very very simple examples. Though please don't get bogged down by the intricacies that I share at times. It is usually because it is getting recorded, and that you can refer to it at a later stage. Probably it might help you at a later stage. Don't worry too much about it, and I can always simplify it more if you require. Please ask me more questions. Please stop me if you're getting confused. So you will not be doing a favor to yourself, but to the other members in the group as well. But thank you so much for being so patient in the session today. It has been really helpful for me. I'm not sure about you, but I hope it has been equally helpful for you. I just wanted to end it with a bang, with all the technicalities and the intricacies. So maybe you don't realize, but we have discussed 2 major designs that are used in evaluation. One is the quasi-experimental design. The other is the RCT that I just talked about, randomized controlled trials. So starting tomorrow, we'll just discuss everything in greater detail and with less technicalities. Okay, so please don't worry about it. It's a nice session. It's a very interesting session, and we'll have a lot of examples to talk about tomorrow. All right. Thank you so much. Is there anything else that we require? That's all for the session, right? Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone.